Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a new AF Chat with me, Ariel from App Figures. And today I have Katie from StoreMaven, a company that I've been looking at for a long time. And we're kicking off a 4-part series about one of my favorite topics of late, A-B testing. So, Katie, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what is StoreMaven?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. And obviously, a topic really close to my heart, A/B testing. I'm Katie. You can probably hear, but nice to see some fellow Brits in the audience as well. I've been in tech, goodness, for about the same time that the App Store's been around, so quite a while now. I didn't start out in mobile, I'll be honest, but definitely always marketing, like user acquisition, and then now working at StoreMaven, which is, for those who don't know, we're a mobile growth technology. So really focused in on mobile growth and App Store optimization. We started out with an A/B testing product, so really have been using A/B testing and building up our expertise for a very long time. And in addition, reporting tools as well. So we're really all about how you get higher engagement and drive user acquisition.
That's kind of the name of the game these days. More downloads,
Exactly.
more user acquisition, more money. So that's why having Katie here is a perfect way to kick off this series. So we're going to be talking today about, we'll start with the basics. What is A/B testing? Why is it relevant? Why is it important? I love A/B testing, so I can jump right into how to do it, but I don't think that's a great starting point. So we're going to talk about those things, and then we're going to talk a little bit about why is this relevant all of a sudden? Why is everyone talking about A/B testing? Why did I already write 2 guides about A/B testing? And that's because in iOS 15, Apple is finally opening up the App Store for native A/B tests, which are going to be a great way for us to just get more downloads. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that, and we're going to be talking about this kind of natural move or shift that's happening right now that we're seeing because of changes in iOS 14.5 with app tracking transparency, and how that's really just shifting spends towards more organic or necessitating more organic, which is also another great reason to invest more in A/B testing and App Store optimization. And whether it's A/B testing for keywords or A/B testing for graphics or A/B testing for pretty much anything that your users see, it's all about this experimentation. If you read any of the articles that I write, or any of the app teardowns that I do every week, or even any of the ASO guides that we have, you'll see that experimentation is kind of the name of the game the way I see it. And someone asked me just recently what I think the trends are going to be for the next year in App Store optimization. I said it's all about experimentation. Whether, again, you're experimenting with how you say things, how you show things, or even the pricing of your app or game, that's going to have a huge impact on how you'll be able to convert people who show up on your App Store page. And the same goes for Google Play. This is not specifically for Apple. Apple is kind of just the catalyst because everyone is talking about it, but that's really what it is. So, Katie, you've been working with clients on A/B testing directly and things like A/B testing for a while, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny hearing you mention about everything Apple's introducing and how that's just blowing up all the opportunities everyone has. And actually, Google Play have offered this for quite a long time, but we began even before that. So before there was any opportunity, sort of the world when you put anything, you just wanted to get your app out there, and there was no thought really to what you were showcasing, any of the creatives, the language, and our founders really saw an opportunity with that because it is a very big part of the funnel. It's the landing page that traditionally one landing page that you came to and then make your final decision. And there's so many things that you can do with that, and so many ways that you can speak to your audience and also learn about your audience. So we've, been watching not only the way that people evolve with what they design and what they test, but also what the app stores offer, because they've evolved a lot. If we look back to, I think probably what you were saying, 2009, 2010, it's unrecognizable. So there's so many opportunities, and really exciting to watch the evolution.
Absolutely. And it is evolution. It's changed so drastically. It's unrecognizable. I actually compared a screenshot of the App Store in 2009 when a game that we built was featured to today. night and day. If you ask someone if these are the
Um,
same two stores, they'll be like, no, absolutely not. Doesn't make any sense. So it makes sense that now, as everything is getting more competitive, as the store is changing. Both Apple and Google are making changes to how things look and how the navigation is and what the flows are like. It's incredibly important to, once you have someone in your apps page or games page, turn them into a download, because if not, they're going to go away and likely download someone else's app or game. So, how would you describe A/B testing at its most basicest of forms?
I think I'll use an analogy here, and that's kind of a storefront. You're walking down a high street and you have a store. That's the moment that somebody can walk past or be enticed in. And that means you showcase your storefront in the way that is going to be the most attractive and really drive foot traffic into your store and increase the chance of, purchase, repeat customers, or whatever it is that you're really aiming towards, maybe. Um, there's many things that could happen there, but this is what you want to accomplish. And I think it's exactly the same when we look at the App Store. It's just a digital version. It's an opportunity. You're driving, you're advertising, you're really pushing a message about your brand and your product, and then driving everyone through to an App Store page. How is it that you showcase why they want to download this app? How do you make it as attractive as possible? People make decisions on that very quickly. It's almost instinctive sometimes. We see it at like 3 to 6 seconds is normally the
Oh,
maximum
wow.
amount of time. Yeah, so it's an impression that you give. And A/B testing is a way to really understand intrinsic motivations, and how you can showcase what people are looking for and make them want to come in, make them want to download.
I think that does it. That is a good explanation, because ultimately, if you think about a store, the way that you would see it from a street is always limited. You can't see the entire store. You can't see all the offerings. It's the same with ads. You can't really advertise every single feature your product or whatever it has to offer. I always think about A/B testing as in, I am a good, let's say, copywriter or designer, or thinking about what the value is that I want to put out there and kind of highlight, because it is limited. What if I'm wrong? And so, what if I think that some background color with some color of text or some visual, or some specific keyword is going to be the most impactful? What if it isn't? And I'm wrong. If I'm right, awesome. I did it.
Yeah.
But the odds that I'll be right are probably as low as the odds that I'm wrong, if I want
We
to
play
be
this game.
positive.
Sorry, no, I was going to say we play that game a lot. We'll set up a test and then we'll all make bets on which one we think is going to be the winner. We're like, definitely, this is the most visually appealing and it really speaks to it. And you realize that you're so in the weeds, as we say, you're so invested and you understand this product in a way that's not speaking to the actual mindset and audience that you're going after. And, it's not always the wrong guess, but many times the one that you really are putting your money on is not the winning variation. So you're absolutely right about that one.
Yeah. So that's why A/B testing to me is just, it's a must. It's not even it would be nice to have. It's a must in everything we do. When we send emails, for example, any sort of email that we send, the subject is usually A/B tested. And we always have at least 3 variations. And the things that I've seen sometimes are extremely counterintuitive. So we do the same thing where we try to guess what would would get us the most opens on an email, and it's not always what I thought it was. And I've done this so many times that you'd think by now know exactly what a good subject is. So with A/B testing, the idea is that you take the storefront or this front that you have, and you try it with different variations across some number of your real users, and then you see what they like the most, what converts the most, and then you apply that for all the other users. And
Exactly.
yeah, it makes so much sense once you're, like you said, we're in the weeds, so I understand the value of this, but it came from not thinking that in the beginning, it was like, it's a lot of work, and is it worth it? And the answer, in my experience, is always yes. Always, always yes.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Apple are now releasing this is a major part of their iOS 15 product, and the fact that Google also entered into that just showcases the value. I don't think that these companies invest in something that's not going to be a very valuable tool. We've known it for a really long time. We know that it's not just, of course, it's about increasing conversion. I think something else we don't talk about is the decreasing conversion, which can happen if you put the wrong variation in place. So testing is a really important part. But it's also when you test, you learn. You learn more about what people, what messaging works best. What are people actually thinking about your app? What do your audiences care about? It's a tool set that I think you can utilize in so many different aspects of your product, and you gain a lot of knowledge from it.
Absolutely. I think the learning, even if you don't get more conversion or less conversion or the conversion rates that you really wanted, the learning is just great because unless you're just doing this once and that's it. But if you're going to do this more than once and you actually want to continue drumming up downloads for your app, that you have to do that. So the reason why we keep bringing Apple up, for those of you who have not tried A/B testing before, is because the idea with A/B testing is you take your real users, so the ones that are seeing your app in the App Store or on Google Play, and you give them two variations. You give them a set of screenshots that, let's say, has a blue background and a set of screenshots that has green backgrounds. I don't know why you would do that, but let's just say you do. And you see which users tap that download or that get button more often. The problem is you still can't until iOS 15 ships. You can't really do that in the App Store. So StoreMaven came up with their own idea of how to do it, which was, I would say, the de facto standard up until pretty much now. Can you tell us more a little bit how A/B testing was done pre-iOS 15?
Yeah, sure. So you would essentially send curated audience through to, I guess we'll call it a fake App Store page. We would mirror exactly what the App Store would look like. It would be made to look exactly the same, except that we could track, and we still can actually, it's not past tense, we can track everything that a user is doing on that page. So it allows us to see not only which variation is most effective from a download perspective, which variation is leading to more users installing, but also the why. We can see how they engage. Are they scrolling more of the gallery? Or are they making their decision based on the first impression, which is just icon, title, and the first either video or first two creatives, basically? Are they exploring the description? What part of the product page that you have is leading your users to install, and how does that differ per variation? So it's been really, really insightful to gain that knowledge, I was saying, of kind of, yes, we know that this blue background variation does perform better than green, but here's why. It's because it made users want to scroll through your screenshots more because it had a really great beach theme that matched the blue background and it was exciting. And then they were like, yes, I want to engage with this app. So that's how we do it now.
That's a great point. So before iOS 15, you couldn't really do anything in the store. So it had to have been done outside of the store. And when it's outside the store, that means that it has nothing really to do with the App Store. But by mirroring the App Store page, you kind of get the same understanding of what's happening, which is very clever. But there are some challenges with that. One, it costs a lot of money because you have to drive traffic to this page. You have to get people to actually click a link to go to this page. And for some companies, especially for the smaller shops, that is just not something they would do from my experience. But then the other is that once they get to that page, they tap the get button, they're going to get taken to the App Store page. And they're going to have to do all of that again with potentially different screenshots, different icon, different name, different everything. And so that also caused some friction. I think that had people stay away from it at the smaller probably level where you're thinking every dollar I spend has to turn into a download. And if it doesn't, I did something wrong. But the learning is very important. But so when Apple will introduce A/B testing in iOS 15, we're going to get some of this for free technically. And we'll be able to test in the App Store so we don't have to drive more traffic. It would still kind of work if you don't have a lot of page views on the App Store. You still need some sort of page views. That's not going to happen magically. But all that will be native, which means you'll be able to start an A/B test and end an A/B test kind of all on your own, super easy. But you don't get all those additional metrics, which is a valid point. Do you find that with just basic A/B testing, so with the kind of reporting that we'll get from Apple, it doesn't tell the full story and you can make mistakes with that?
I think you just have to curate a little bit more the way that you'd construct a test. If you're able to see a lot more information on how users are exploring and doing more, perhaps you could test multiple assets and start to understand whether users are actually engaging with that gallery or whether it was not the gallery that had an impact, but the icon. You could see that. I think it's incredible that Google did this, and now Apple is sort of democratizing the ability to A/B test, like you said, for those where, budgets are more concerning, or the path, the obstacles to test feel a little harder. I think it's wonderful that this could be made easier, but like you said, challenges, and the challenges will be, this is your live traffic, so your funnel can be affected. So we need to be really smart about the type of test we put in. We're always aiming for driving higher conversions. And then also, how do we learn from it? And if we do too much in that test, is it just going to be sort of redundant that one did win, but we don't understand why, because there were so many assets that got changed and the assets was completely different in so many ways. That's something that is, I think, all solvable by thinking about the goal of your test. Like, what is it that you really want to understand when you're going into this? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to understand a value proposition? What messaging is most effective to my users? Or are you trying to understand what design works best? If you're a photo app, is it what kind of visuals, what kind of color palette is most engaging? I think when you know the question, it's much easier when you're analyzing the results to understand what was more effective and how you can iterate on that.
I think all that makes definitely a ton of sense. If you know your question, you'll understand your answer. So that takes us really into the strategy now. So we talked about what A/B testing is, why it's necessary at this point. So how do you go about constructing an A/B test on a more strategic level? What do you ask? What do you do? How do you get started if you've never done this before?
There are so many different ways to begin, and I think that can be intimidating in and of itself. So I think I need to say that because it's important to always have the context of your app or your game, of what you understand about kind of your audience, and also your general brand image and your ads. I always think that's somewhere you could also start, is thinking about the different ads you have and what kind of ads, the messaging or the visuals that work well, and then translating that into something within the App Store. If you want, you can start small and start testing different icons. If it's an app, if it's a game, for example, that has characters in it, maybe trying out different characters in the icon, if they have kind of good meaning. And then the question, of course, of that is, which character or which part of my app do users engage with the best? So working a little bit backwards there, but the question that you want to discover is the most important starting point. Are you trying to understand what element? Maybe your app offers many different things. I think a good example is food delivery apps that over COVID expanded into grocery delivery and many other services. Maybe that's the question you want to ask. What part of my app is the most engaging? Which speaks to my audience at this time? Now countries might be starting to open up. Maybe they want to go back into a food situation versus a grocery delivery versus emergency supplies, and then creating the designs that really speak to those differences, making the differences really clear as well, so that there's good options to compare against each other.
I think that's definitely a good starting point. It's hard to A/B test if you're thinking, I just want to get more downloads. It's easier to A/B test if you're thinking, does this value proposition or caption on a screenshot get me more downloads than this other caption. So as you reduce it from, I just want to get more downloads, can I use this A/B testing thing that I heard about on this really awesome webinar today, to I have these two ideas. I can highlight, in the example of food delivery, I can highlight my grocery delivery, or I can highlight my food delivery. And then if food delivery gets more downloads, you know that that's how you're supposed to do this. And you can go from there. I actually wrote a guide with, I believe, 16 different ideas for things you can test within your screenshots. And within it's the size of the screenshot and the way you label it, and whether the caption is above or below the actual visual that you have. And so we have all these really easy examples that we can kickstart with. And you mentioned something before about not testing too many things at once so we can see what's going on. What is your recommendation for testing? A/B testing, multivariate testing? How would you recommend for people to get started with that?
I mean, it's a great question because, I've seen many different types of tests where they want to totally overhaul everything, and they'll have, people will test the app, the icon matching a creative visual, and so it's like that full first impression impact. Again, if that's the question that you have, like, what is the value proposition, and you want to really have strong, big impact, and then you're happy to iterate on that a little bit more. Like, okay, we've seen this, let's go in and look more at whether this icon works better against others. This is one really good approach, but it's the process of understanding. I think that it's important to bear in mind the amount of work that can go into this. So doing a total overhaul of your product page is a huge amount of creative work. There's a lot of assets to build here, many of which will only see a short testing period and not many users. So I think for people who are starting out, it's a really good idea to start small because it's more manageable. It's easier to understand what's actually going on. I've mentioned the icon. It's a very visible asset. It appears not just on the product page, but also in search results. It's everywhere. But when you also first come into the product page, you'll see either that first screenshot or a video and what we call a poster frame. This is for iOS, and then with Google Play, a video and feature graphic. Videos is a really high investment piece. And, on Google Play, it's not always autoplay. So it's probably a lot of work for potential value add. So I think adapting those first screenshots, maybe the first one or two, is really powerful. They can tell a really, really impactful message. They're very strong assets for A/B testing. And then it allows you to see which one's working and then build out further into adapting your full product page.
I think those are all great points. And one of the great things that was in this sentence is you don't have to change all of your screenshots for every A/B test. You can change just the first or the second. What is most visible? I didn't even think about that. I keep thinking about an A/B test being a completely different set of things, whatever the things are, screenshots or anything else. This is a good point. So in theory, you can get started by testing two variations of a single screenshot, the first screenshot, and it doesn't even have to be a totally different one. It could be just a reshuffle even of screenshots. When I do app teardowns, one of the first things that I always look at is the first screenshot really selling the product, really giving a hook to the user. And that can be social proof in some cases. That can be integrations for an app that needs integrations. I was looking at a remote control not too long ago, and the remote control works with a whole bunch of TVs from different makers, and the first screenshot had all those makers. So if I'm downloading or if I'm looking to download the remote control and I see this, I go, yes, that will work for me. So it's these sort of things. And with A/B testing, you can really see, do people care about the fact that I have a keyboard on my remote, or do they care that it's going to work with their television? I mean, there's an obvious answer here, but maybe not. Maybe it is a little bit different than that, and that's where A/B testing comes in. So this is really great. So now that you have A/B testing set up and it's in place, what do you do? What's next?
I mean, obviously measurement, analyzing is really important, but I mentioned like making sure that every time you're testing, you're making learnings from it. I think this is only more important. We haven't really talked about this, but with Apple and iOS 15, they're opening up the ability to have actually many more product pages designed, not specifically A/B tested, but to deliver a different message to your paid audiences. So basically, to customize what they'll see based on the audience, and it's very important to actually understand what works best to your audience, to have knowledge of this. So I'd say that, before jumping into, okay, it's live, great, let's start thinking about the next one. We've got to take a moment and say, okay, what have we learned? Who came through to this test? And what have we started to see are their preferences? Okay, this is great. What additional questions has this opened up for me? Could it be that they liked this variation because it was, to go back to our previous analogy, it's because I was showing my food services, and right now we're coming into, I don't know, the weather is terrible, everybody's inside, but soon it's going to get very, very warm. Maybe I need to adapt into something that speaks more to that. Like really thinking about the context, the reasons why it could happen. Allow yourself to create new hypotheses to understand the reason that this could happen. And this allows you to think about the next test, but it's also really powerful for what Apple's giving, which is to say you can actually expand this out and you can take all of those variations you've used and start testing them around different audiences. So the possibilities are actually endless, which is amazing. And I think the most powerful part of this is that you are learning more about how your brand works to different people and why they're choosing the variations that they've chosen. And it's so powerful.
Definitely. And I think we probably should talk about product pages, custom product pages. But before we dive into that, or before we get into more specific Apple stuff, and I do want to talk about why app tracking transparency is important to consider here. When it comes to running tests, how long do you run a test? Is it a set it and forget it type thing?
Great question. I think that, well, first of all, it's dependent on volumes, on how many people are seeing this to be able to get a good enough sample size that you have, I guess, what we would call confidence that this is going to work. So definitely that's an important piece. And also that you're seeing enough differences between that you can start to make really clear conclusions. Sometimes the minimum we say is 7 days, because we do know that there's weekday and weekend bias. There are different preferences based on the day. I think it's a very obvious reasoning when you explain it. The way that you're browsing and thinking about things during your work week with everything that's going on around is very different to the way that you're browsing and requiring things from your phone on the weekend when you're juggling more of your home life or you're relaxing, socializing. So your requirements and your phone usage is very different, and that behavior translates into the App Store. So we say 7 days minimum to allow for a very clean test and to take that all into consideration. And then anything above that is based on, as I said, volumes, on whether you're starting to see learnings, but it's not clear cut enough. So you want to keep it running a bit longer. Yep. It's not, there's no mathematical equation for this. There are algorithms, I think, built around this, but not something that I can explain clearly here. But 7 days minimum.
That makes sense. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before. It's all about your question. If you know your question, until you have your answer, you're probably not done. So if you have your answer in 7 days or 8 days or 9 days, great. If you need 30 days, okay. I mean, we're looking at something that could help exponentially increase the number of the conversion. So the number of people who get your app. And we're also, when you think about A/B testing, we're optimizing that one very important thing where if you drive double the traffic, you will get, without optimization, you will just get double the downloads. You optimize your traffic and your conversion, you could get 3 times, 4 times. And that's a really powerful little lever. There's a question in the chat that is, what volume would you consider good enough for A/B tests? Is there such a number?
Yeah, I mean, it's another great question. Something that's important to make mention of is Google Play and Apple will be releasing, and Stormaven as well. We have algorithms that work on kind of predictive modeling. So this is something they're all constructed slightly differently. Apple is following the Bayesian model, which is also what we've done. I think Google Play might be slightly different, but there's a machine working to try to predict what is taking place. It's not clear yet whether Apple will be kind of stating whether there's been enough samples or not, but it's a monitor that's important. If you feel like the confidence level is not high enough, it's normally an indicator that you need more users to be able to build up the algorithm's confidence in this test. So it's very dependent on monitoring those things. From our side, we would say about 400 views per variation is a very healthy number.
Okay. That is a lower number than I would have expected. I was expecting like 10,000 views.
Yeah, so that's what we've perfected over the years, is being able to predict this much more effectively based on small volumes, because we understand the risks that are involved with testing, the costs of testing, and also if you have poorly running variations, you will have a drop in conversions, and that is, a really big risk, because you're investing so much money in driving users through to the product page. We are at kind of the end of the funnel. So any user who turns away because the variation wasn't strong enough is very upsetting and very costly. Yeah. So it's always been an intention of ours to try to manage that balance of like how statistically making sure we have proper statistical confidence, but without having to kind of waste users on lower performing variations.
That's actually something I did not think about. So yes, if you run a test over a long amount of time, a large number of users, that's what I was going for, you will eventually have your answers. But in this model where you're driving all the traffic and you don't know if the traffic will actually turn into downloads, it's kind of a lose-lose to keep it on for a long time. So it's really your incentive to fine-tune those algorithms and make them really as smart as possible, and you have all the data to do it. And so that's really clever. That's really cool. Do you think that in your experience, have there been times where experiments were just running and just wouldn't yield good enough responses or good enough results that they would have to be done again or tweaked? And would you say that happens more often or less often than a test would be like, yes, you do this and everything is great, or no, don't do that?
I mean, it happens for sure. I don't know about more or less often, but I do know that, it depends again on what you're trying to measure. So for us, we say it's really valuable to measure the kind of difference, the winning variations, you may want to say, the leading variation, most likely against the control, right? Against what you currently have in store. If you're measuring it against each other, it's sometimes harder, because you could have two really amazing variations. Maybe you've done a total design overhaul and the design overhaul has been really well received, and there's one that's just slightly edging above the other, and it's really hard to tell if one is more successful than the other because the margin between them is so small. And then I'd say, you have a choice, but both of them are much, much better performing than what you currently have in store. So you're going to gain either way. And then it aligns with, what's more on brand, what fits in with the message and the way we want to present ourselves. Also it opens up, maybe we could test this a bit more. Maybe we can combine both of those and see if there's something that, speaks to both of the styles. So that's a way to look at the test. I'm always comparing what is leading versus what's in store, because I care about uplift. I do care about having the confidence that if I'm going to make a change, it's going to be received well. So this is very important to me when looking at tests.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, goes back to the question that you have. If you know what you're looking for, then it will be much easier to craft your test, to know how long you should keep it on. You have all these ideas. And I know once upon a time we did an event We actually did an event at the Twitter headquarters a few years ago, which was a lot of fun. And a question came from the audience, which was, what do you do if an A/B test runs and ends with a result that's not statistically significant? Do you cut it and say, I feel like the leading result is probably going to be the winner, or do you do something else? And the response was, no, you just run it again. From an expert who was, I believe, also referring to StoreMaven as the tool of choice at that time for A/B testing. Would you agree with that? Would you say look for that kind of like mathematical yes, the computer, the programmatic yes, or trust your gut on this if you don't have a programmatic yes?
I think there's always context, right? It's even when we're measuring success in the App Store, we want to be able to isolate a version update with new creatives and say, like, how successful was this 100%? And there's always noise. There's always something else happening. There's always branding efforts. There's always the ad to come into it. There's so many factors. I'm very much, I wouldn't say in the middle. I really believe I do believe in algorithms. I do believe that they're very important in making sure that we're not going to disrupt the funnel when we set things live, and having the confidence that this has been really tested and looked at from all angles. But relying only on algorithms is also not valuing our expertise and our minds and our abilities. And marketing is moving into a contextual marketing world where you need to understand this and you need to have context, and that takes, a robot can't do that so easily. So yes, I definitely think that there's room for understanding the context of your product, understanding what you've done in the past and what works well, and always applying that. Nothing should happen in isolation.
That makes a lot of sense. I do see a pattern here with A/B testing is as much art as it is science, and the computer can tell us, the models can help us get answers more quickly to the questions we have to ask, but it's always about context. And I think that's also where A/B testing becomes both fun and also challenging. It's that you can use it for pretty much everything. There are a few questions in the Q&A, which is where everyone should put questions right into the Q&A. And if you want to see a question answered, upvote it or thumbs up it, whatever that is. And we'll get to those in a second. I've seen them. I know Daniel's question has been waiting for a while. We'll get to it. But the idea that you can't just rely on numbers, it's not an Excel sheet. It's like both the stuff that you A/B test, what you A/B test, and how you interpret the results are things that you learn. I think if you were getting started, that might sound overwhelming. Like, how do I know? And I think the easy answer is you can tell with technology today, with that Excel sheet, you can probably tell what's going to work. It's maybe not going to be the idealist of solutions, and it's not going to give you the most, but over time you build intuition. The alternative is to go to someone like Katie, who has done this so many times that she has the intuition and can help you do that right from the get-go. Is that would you say accurate from what you've seen? Learn on your own or go to the expert?
I mean, obviously, I hope there's value in coming here. And in fairness, we've seen so many different tests, and we have a lot of context. There are things that you can do yourselves as well, though. It's looking at how your competitors are presenting themselves, looking at apps that you aspire to be like and how they're presenting themselves from a design perspective, from a messaging perspective. The inspiration is available to everyone. The marketplace is open. So digging in and seeing what's out there is a fantastic way to start. And it's something that we do very robust, what we'd call audits with all our clients, where we really look at the industry, other parts of the industry, aspirational apps, ones that are really pushing the boundaries of design and style, and still keeping it within Apple's very, very clear guidelines. Google's also moving to pretty strict guidelines, so that always comes into play, and it's important to remember. So looking at others for inspiration is a really, really great way to start, actually. And help to come up with something when you feel totally stuck for ideas. So that's something you can try.
That makes a lot of sense. I talk a lot about learning from competitors, whether it's what they're doing, what they're using for keywords. That's what I talk about most times. But looking at what they do with screenshots and with their icons and the colors is also extremely important. And that's actually a tool we're working on to make that very easy to see. I imagine that also exists with StoreMaven. So it's one of those things that you just have to do. Now, there are a few questions in the Q&A that it's time to get to. And the first one is from Daniel, who's been waiting patiently for minutes now. And Daniel is asking, is A/B testing in general used for fine-tuning of features or also for new features visible to a percent of customers? I think we talked about that kind of briefly. We touched on it before, but do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I do. I think there's even more to unpack in this. People also do concept testing. A lot of game developers will concept test ideas, apps as well. How does what you're creating or thinking about creating speak to your audience, and comparing different ideas against each other, which one's leading? So that's definitely a way. And I think also just a regular A/B test, if you are doing a big marketing effort around a new feature that you're releasing, or it's something that you want to have more visibility and you want that type of user to be downloading your app, you think that it will lead to higher retention, many other reasons, then yeah, test whether that works. Put that as your first screenshot. Don't leave it till the end. And test that against what you're most commonly known for, what you perhaps have had as your main feature, and test them. See if people want what they know you traditionally for, or they want the new.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And like I was saying before, I think A/B testing is more of a mindset than an actual like piece of technology or anything like that. You have to think about, how do I slice this in a way that could work for more people? And when we talk about custom product pages from Apple, that will come into play, which I really want to get to. But we have more questions. There is a question that I saw. Questions are not coming from both the Q&A and the chat. Please put them in the Q&A, but I'm going to try and get both. So Yvonne is asking, when A/B testing within the game, some players may notice. How do you address this to them? They see the difference.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe with Apple making it native, it will be different. With the custom product pages that Apple introduced, that's actually going to be their full flow. So they won't be redirected into a different environment. And when it's native, they also won't. It's the only App Store page they'll see. So that's definitely, they'll notice that you're trying something new. And if you get a lot of forums that are sensitive to these things, then you have to be prepared for that. I think definitely with Google Play, I think potentially with Apple, with ourselves as well, you can limit the audience that sees it. So you could definitely with custom product pages and with ourselves, you could restrict it to people who've potentially signed a special email list. So that they're aware of it being more private. It would skew the test. That's something important to mention, because you're isolating an audience. So that's a risk that you have, but it depends which risk is more painful to you.
That is very true. I used to be, so now that I'm thinking A/B testing, to me, A/B testing extends even beyond visuals and keywords and assets. It's also about pricing. And we've been A/B testing our pricing for probably years at this point. And it was really scary at the beginning. It's like, what do you do if someone sees your pricing page now and then goes on to something else where we can't match the same test version, and they see it and they freak out and like, I don't want to pay you more. I don't want to pay less. Well, I don't understand this. Or like you were saying, in forums or people share on social media. And ultimately we got to the understanding that it can add such a positive to everything, to our growth, to our bottom line, that if anyone sees it, we just explain to them that we're A/B testing because we want to improve our business. And nice. I have yet to see a single case when someone was like, oh, I hate this. And they always understand, especially when they pay less, if that's the case. So sometimes you just have to own it and continue. So there's a question from Mitko who's asking, is there a way to also A/B test the keywords we have in the App Store listing? And the answer is not with A/B tests. Because that would really confuse the algorithm. So for keywords, you would have to do a before and after test.
But with Google Play, you can actually do the long description, which they do index.
True.
Yeah. And with Apple, they will allow you, I think, to do the short the promotional text. So that's the short description in Google Play. So they're allowing you to do that. But on Store Maven, we actually do test title changes and subtitle changes. We see a huge difference when we test title changes specifically. But you're absolutely right. It makes it very confusing if you're in the actual native platform when considering all the places that your title appears. It can get more messy.
I can see it. There is one little tiny trick, and that is if you think about keywords as intents, and you can use different keywords inside of your screenshots. And now we go back to what we were saying before about grocery delivery versus food delivery. Yes. And then from those learnings, you can reintegrate those back into your keyword list, long description, all the different descriptions. So you can, but not directly.
And they have different purposes. Keywords are very much for discoverability as well, versus installs. But yeah, title they do have an impact. Yeah,
ultimately. It is also, at the end of the day, it's humans on the other side. So it's not just a clear cut. If you include, this color or this variation, boom, everyone's going to love it. Like some people love it. We're running out of time, so we'll try to get through these questions quick. And I still want to talk about custom product pages. But Umid is asking, how can we create a right combination of changes for logo and screenshots in A/B testing? Should we try them one by one, or should we do 4 different combinations for 2 assets? So kind of like A/B testing of a single asset versus multivariate testing. We touched on this before, but what would you recommend as more of like a basic rule of thumb?
If you're starting out, I'd go for 1. Try 1 asset, see what you can learn from that, and then expand.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It's also simpler to do the reporting on it. It's also simpler to understand, did this move the needle? And then continue from there. Cool. There are more questions, but I do want to talk about custom product pages because, one, there is a lot of confusion about what they are and how to utilize them. And I also wrote a guide about that. But 2, also, I think they're going to be extremely useful and directly correlated to the learning side of A/B testing. How do you see custom product pages really integrating into the flow here and helping you improve downloads?
I mean, it's totally changing the game. We've been talking about it splitting the App Store in 2. It also opens up an opportunity to actually test your pure organics. If you move all your paid traffic to even just 1 custom product page, you're isolating your organic audience, and that gives you the chance to natively A/B test with them. How does your organic audience respond? Because their journey to your App Store is totally different from your paid audience. They don't have the same exposure to an ad or a messaging. They're coming through from Apple featuring or searching potentially just a genre keyword, something that is very, very generic, and then they find your app and how do they engage there. So this is a really, really exciting opportunity. But custom product pages for me is just incredible because it's almost infinite in what you can do. 35 custom product pages. Definitely don't recommend anyone go full steam ahead and build 35 custom product pages at the start. But the potential, and I think also what Apple's saying, is that something we really do know, that different audiences have different preferences. Different ads that they see lead to different preferences in the product page. Different sources also could have different preferences. There's just so many ways to look at this. And it's just basically making the product page part of that creative funnel, part of that whole ad campaign flow. There's no such thing now as like UA and then ASO. It's merging it together. It's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give a little bit of context on custom product pages, the idea is that you get to control a specific URL to your page. So it's not something that you can get to from within the store, but if you have a link, you can give that to someone and they get to see a specific set of screenshots and a specific icon also. And so what you were saying about separating your organic audience, meaning people from within the store, and your paid traffic, that means giving them a link to a custom product page. So you can have all the same assets if that's what you really want, but you can easily do the reporting then later on and break them by those 2 segments. And 35 custom product pages is huge. It's a very arbitrary number. Why 35, I don't know, but it's a lot of pages.
It's a lot of pages.
I guess it's better than 20. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of
I'll take
reporting,
it.
like you said, that comes with it, which is really exciting. It opens up a way, iOS 14.5 changed so much. It shook up the industry. It's making it even harder to target that, like to know who those high growth, high value customers are and specifically target them. The benefit is it's opened up your opportunities to a really broad audience. But that makes, being able to having to use one message actually works against you. It's a broad audience and you're using one message that can't speak to everyone. And now you have the chance to say, okay, well, I know this message is going to work with these types of people and here. And that's when I'm saying knowledge is power, learning about your audience, understanding your audiences, and then showcasing to them what works for them. There's huge conversion potential, but also so much that you can learn. And Apple are helping with that with, I think they're releasing retention data and ARPU, average revenue per user data per custom product page as well. So a lot you can do with that.
Yeah, you'll get to really kind of fine tune this. And there's a question from Evan that is too long for me to read, but basically says, how do you put together A/B testing with your App Store page and also A/B testing your ads and things outside of the App Store? And I think custom product pages are really the immediate answer.
Definitely.
So
100%.
So if you are doing any sort of outside testing outside of the App Store, whether it's your ads or which channel brings more traffic, now you can do it directly with your custom product page and have all those same metrics later on to do this with. And I think the reason all this ties together is that all of your learnings from your A/B testing, you can eventually then stretch out to multiple custom product pages that really are fine-tuned for different audiences. And I think that's going to be incredibly powerful.
Definitely.
So we did get to talk about custom product pages, and we're almost out of time. Is there a question specifically that you want to answer from the Q&A, if you can see it?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I read that fast. There's a few questions in there. No one's upvoted anything. One's come through. How much confidence level would be enough for A/B testing? I think we talked about that a little bit, but confidence, it's constructed differently, depends a lot on algorithms. If you want to be really certain, then definitely you're aiming above 90%. But there's always a balance with risks and cost, and you can close variations early. This is also a very good tip for A/B testing. If something isn't working, don't keep it running.
Can you do that with Google? I thought with Google you can end the test. But I didn't think you can do a single one.
I think you could be correct. You might be right on that. Maybe that's proprietary for us. So I'm used to it. I love closing a variation. I know we've had it 7 days and it is definitely not working. And it's a great learning as well, what doesn't work. Always remember that the losing variation is also a really big learning. Why did this not work? What's not speaking to you? And the second part as well. Reduce the positive. Learning from your past tests, iterating on your knowledge. It's a really important lesson to make sure all of your tests are important, and you also know what you're testing and why. Then all your tests are important because you learn from it.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. If for those of you who are listening and you're thinking, I'm going to get to learn about A/B testing today, if there's one thing you take from this, is that whatever you do, whatever test you conduct, whether it's great or terrible or awesome, just learn from it. Learn from the good, learn from the bad. We had an AF chat with Ben a few months ago, who used to be a consultant for ASO and then joined the company. And he was speaking a lot about this, about everything you do is really a learning experience. Why did this work? Why did this not work? Why did this almost work? And if you have this sort of questioning mindset, A/B testing is a tool to really enrich it. And then you can utilize things like custom product pages to really fine tune it. And you can do it across keywords, across screenshots, across features. It's really wonderful, I think. So yeah, if you take one thing away, in my opinion, it would be that. What would you say is the one takeaway that you think is most important?
I think that you should always be hungry to understand what's going on, hungry to really look at the reasons and look at your product page, take a step back and ask yourself, why is this working? Why might this not be working? What are the questions that it raises for you? Maybe do it in 3 to 6 seconds. That's the same time everyone's making their decision on, and see what you come up with.
Always be curious.
Exactly.
Yep. I think that's, hopefully that is a good takeaway from this thing. And I guess on that happy note, I think we're done. We're within time, which is good. And hopefully everyone got to learn from this and really get into the we can do this mindset, which was my goal for this part 1 of the webinar. We have 3 more coming, which we'll get into more detail about seasonality and about the metrics and about really fine-tuning things, so really advanced stuff coming up. So keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation. Katie, thank you so much for joining and sharing all this information. This was great. This was really fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I really did. I feel like I could have gone for another hour, and I'm very aware of time. I don't know if it's my British sensibility, but I was like, oh gosh, we have to finish soon. So thank you. It was really fun. Such a pleasure.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. And if anyone has any questions, how can they find you?
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me, contact our team on the website. I think the website is www.storemaven.com. We have a lot of resources on iOS 15, on A/B testing, a really great blog. So I'd say that's probably the best place to start. Lots of people there from our team are available as well. So definitely Don't hesitate to get in touch. There's a lot of stuff that we're cooking up now that the mobile growth world is sort of blowing up with opportunities.
That's great. So we'll share some of those details later on when we're going to turn this into a video, and it's going to be on the site. So we're going to share that in case anyone is interested in learning more about StoreMaven and learning more about how they can help you with answering those questions or forming those questions to begin with. Cool. Alrighty. Thank you again, Katie, for joining us. Thank you, everyone from all over the world who's joining us. And for those of you who it's very late for, have a good evening and a good night. For the rest of you, have a good day, and I'll see you all on the next one.